There's nobody in India who thinks that Pakistan will not try and retaliate in some manner.
They have a range of weapons as well. Pakistan tested its short-range surface-to-surface missile.
Trump is showing little sign of wanting to get involved as a peace broker. Is India open to listening to anyone?
Pakistan threatens to use a nuclear weapon, sends the world into panic, then begins the urging of restraint. And so there's a sense in India, a growing sense in India, that Pakistan is a nuclear blackmailer.
This is a conflict which, if it escalates, it's definitely going to be damaging for Pakistan. But it's not going to be good for India either.
Hello and welcome to the Fourcast, an act of war. That's how Pakistan has described India's missile attacks in what it said was retaliation for a terrorist assault in Indian-controlled Kashmir, in which 26 men were killed. So where is this heading as Pakistan authorises its military to respond? We're going to have two conversations with two experts from either side. I'm joined from Delhi by the Emmy-nominated reporter Barkha Dutt, who's reported from the front line in previous conflicts between India and Pakistan, and also by Ayesha Siddiqa from the Department of War Studies at King's College, London. She writes extensively on the Pakistan military after serving as the country's director of naval research. Barkha, let's begin with you. What do you think the Indian government believes it has achieved with these strikes?
I think dare I say, unanimous sentiment in India right now is a great sense of pride for the Indian armed forces that have launched 24 missile strikes at 9 terror targets, not just inside Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, but inside Pakistan, Punjab. Now, anyone who tracks Pakistan knows that Pakistan's politics, its army, its wealth is all dominated by the area of Punjab. The fact that India has struck with missiles at the headquarters of the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed inside Pakistan's Punjab, I think is a big statement that India is making about its end of tolerance for Pakistan-backed terrorism. And I do want to add for your viewers in the United Kingdom that the United Kingdom has since 2001 recognized the Lashkar-e-Taiba as a proscribed terror group. So I think this is, of course, about retaliation for the terror attack in Pahalgam in Kashmir, but it is also about making a broader statement about where India stands on terrorism that is backed by the Pakistan army.
Yes, but it is very much still a statement, isn't it? Because although 26 people have been killed, according to those reports, this level of air attack will not significantly degrade those militant groups. So you know, it doesn't stop them attacking again if they want to, does it?
So I think we can have a larger and a longer debate about whether this actually changes Pakistan's calculus on what India very clearly sees as asymmetric warfare, which is to use terrorism against India. So yes, sure, you can ask, does this really close down the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed? Does this really swing Pakistan's policy? And that would be a longer debate. But I think in the here and now, the signaling from these missile strikes is about, as one Indian official told me, strategic resolve and a shift in India's security doctrine. Gone are the days when, India would try and convince the world with dossier upon dossier and then watch in frustration as nothing would be done by capitals around the world to shut down these terrorists. I think it's also a sign of India's patience wearing thin and India making a larger statement that there will be a price to pay every time there is a terror strike.
In terms of the evidence for Pakistan's government involvement or military intelligence, I mean, do you think it will put into the public domain any of the proof, if you like, that this goes beyond just terror groups or militant groups working by themselves?
I think I should first say that India does not seek or need United Nations mediation. It was Pakistan that asked for a closed-door meeting at the United Nations Security Council. At the end of that meeting, there was no statement from the UN. The statement that we got was the set-piece statement on, we hope this doesn't escalate into a big conflict. Pakistan was trying to convince the United Nations that this was, that they were trying to disassociate from the attack. We have not seen any statement from the UN or other countries that Pakistan is not linked to the Lashkar-e-Taiba. So I should say that India doesn't look for UN mediation or UN endorsement. That's the first point. On evidence, Krishnan, I have to say with respect, a nursery kid in India would know that the Lashkar-e-Taiba is an asset of the Pakistan army. It is an asset. And let me tell you why. These two terror groups are the only terror groups in Pakistan. Pakistan likes to say we're also a victim of terror, right? These are the only two terror groups in Pakistan that have never struck inside Pakistan. We don't get why the world doesn't see this. It's staring everybody in the face. But I think India has decided that, look, whether the world gets it, doesn't get it, India is going to go ahead and do what it thinks is right for its own strategic interests and to protect its own people.
I mean, also what's striking is that international governments are not demanding this either, which suggests that, Britain and America and other international governments basically accept the proposition that there has been Pakistani involvement in some of these groups in the past, and therefore it's reasonable for India to assume that there is still some involvement in the present. But it is about sort of, I suppose, world public opinion and India's desire to be, seen as doing the right thing. But, what you're suggesting is they probably won't bother.
So, here's what I'll say. I think there's a gap in information or understanding or comprehension. That's the only way I can understand it. Because both the United States and the United Kingdom do recognize these outfits to be terror groups officially on their own, right? These are proscribed terror groups for the governments of the United States and the United Kingdom, which makes it pretty shocking that just like we saw like a worldwide sort of condemnation of the Hamas terror attacks of October 7th, we can have a different debate on, whether we agree with how Israel responded over a prolonged period of time. But there was no ambiguity in the opinion of the world that was a terror attack, and who the backers of the Hamas were. I think in the same way there is growing frustration, anger, irritation with the Western world in India, and I can say this to you. I'm not speaking for the government. I'm just speaking as an Indian. You ask any Indian of any political affiliation, and they'll tell you the same thing. That why isn't the Western world getting this? Why is it? Because traditionally the West has needed Pakistan for its operations in Afghanistan. Well, that's past too. The Taliban and the Pakistan today also have problems. These terror groups, globally recognized terror groups, are able to operate with impunity. And by the way, there is reason to believe that the heads of these two terror groups were taken into protection by the Pakistan military. So while there have been strikes on their terror bases and India has given out a figure of 70 terrorists eliminated, India is not saying that the heads of these groups have been eliminated, because Pakistan has obviously taken them into protection.
The question is what happens now. The Pakistani Prime Minister has said he's authorized retaliation. Now, given that India's strikes are missile strikes, you have to assume that any retaliation could also involve missile strikes. If it goes to that, what's India's response without escalating out of control?
It's an excellent question. And I will tell you that the official statement by the government on these strikes underlined the fact that India was not seeking escalation, that it had shown restraint in avoiding military installations or civilians. However, what happens next depends on the nature of the Pakistani response. If the Pakistani response is contained and does not take strike at a target that would take this up the escalatory ladder, India would respond one way. What if
they hit a military target?
I think if it was an open field near a military installation, is very different from hitting a military installation. So I think we have to see what Pakistan does. I can tell you that the Indian military does expect Pakistan to respond, and this has, according to everybody I've spoken to and interviewed on and off camera, been war gamed into the plan. There's nobody in India who thinks that Pakistan will not try and retaliate in some manner. But what route Pakistan chooses and behind the scenes how much global pressure is being exerted on Islamabad, which we don't know about, I think will determine what happens next.
There's been cross-border firing again. That's resumed after a relative period of calm for some years. What is the danger of that escalating into a much bigger skirmish or something on the scale of the Kargil war?
So I don't think that the firing at the line of control and the international border will escalate into the levels of the Kargil war, a war I reported, because that was about Pakistanis sitting on Indian territory and the Indians fighting to get them out. This is Pakistan in its own place, Indian in its own place, but firing across this line. However, the people who suffer in this are civilians. We have had reports of 9 Indians killed in Pakistani firing. We've had orders to evacuate villagers from the front line. So clearly, that is, I would say, a tragic consequence of the situation, but one that is the cost, unfortunately, of India's determination to retaliate and seek justice.
How does India see Pakistan as a military rival? I mean, obviously, in terms of sheer numbers, India dwarfs Pakistan. It has more of everything, and more money and more resource and more development. But around a small area, those sorts of calculations aren't so simple.
Yeah. Look, Krishnan, the Indian military vets and serving and retired officers that I've been speaking to, they make the point that the Pakistan army is a professional army and therefore they will see it as a professional adversary. But they add 2 points that I think it's important for the audience to understand. One is that this is an army that India sees as increasingly radicalized and Islamized. The Pakistan army chief is seen to be a deeply unpopular figure at home. This conflict with India gives him perhaps a short window to become popular for a brief amount of time. He's jailed Imran Khan. Imran Khan today is by far the most popular civilian politician in Pakistan. He has an insurgency on his hands in Balochistan, so he's also unpopular because of that. While the Indian military sees the Pakistan military as a professional adversary, one, they see it as an increasingly Islamized military. Second, they do not believe that the military always fights conventional warfare. They believe that terrorism is the way that the Pakistan military chooses to inflict pain on India, and that is why what we have seen today has happened.
And where did nuclear weapons come into this, and how do they change the equation?
So India has a no first use doctrine. And it is a voluntary no first use doctrine when it comes to nuclear weapons. Pakistan has in the last few days multiple times said that if needed, it would use its full spectrum of options, which would include the nuclear weapons. I can quote to you at least 3 high-ranking officials, including 2 ministers of the Pakistan government, who have made this threat. India sees this as nuclear blackmail. They basically think that the world comes running to de-escalate because every time this happens, Pakistan threatens to use a nuclear weapon, sends the world into panic, then begins the urging of restraint. And so there's a sense in India, a growing sense in India, that Pakistan is a nuclear blackmailer.
Yeah, but who's going to urge restraint now? I mean, who are the big geopolitical brokers? Because Trump is showing little sign of wanting to get involved as a peace broker. Is India open to listening to anyone?
I don't think India will listen to anybody on the right to respond. I don't think India will listen to anybody on urging, oh, why don't you sit down and talk to Pakistan? I think that phase is well in the past. But I think there is a space for countries that do not want this to escalate to recognize that the terror groups that its own government prescribes as terror groups are operating freely in Pakistan, and to do something to shut that down. That I think would be the best way for de-escalation to take place.
Right. So, but the old-fashioned idea of America coming along to sort of knock heads together, that's all gone.
You know what? India doesn't accept third-party mediation, but yes, behind the scenes, we've seen, in realpolitik that does take place. Trump seems too distracted. His comment on camera was a bit banal. He keeps talking about, these countries have been fighting for 1,000 years. These countries have not existed. Neither ours nor Pakistan have existed for 1,000 years, right? But there's an expectation that there are other officials in the American administration who understand the region better, who understand the challenges better, who understand the dynamics better. There's also a sense in India that despite Trump's banality, the Biden administration in India was seen to have been much softer on Pakistan than the Trump administration. There's a sense in India that behind the scenes, America will not tie India's hands.
And what is the China dynamic now? Because obviously Pakistan is getting weapons from China now. As its relationship with America has gone cold, it's warmed up its relationship with China. How does that change things, which is obviously a strategic rival and, well, enemy in parts of Kashmir to India?
Yeah, it's a good question. And there's been a lot of conversation about China here at home. And the conclusion seems to be that China will and has lent rhetorical support to Pakistan, but that China will not be drawn in militarily. That if push comes to shove, China will make a few statements, supporting Pakistan, but China is not going to, for example, in the eastern Himalaya, in the high reaches of the Himalayas in eastern Ladakh, you've had Chinese troops and Indian troops both stationed because of a conflagration that took place in 2020. I don't think, for instance, that China is going to suddenly say, okay, let's now erupt this particular line of actual control, as it's called, so that India is under greater pressure. So I don't think there's a sense that China will do more than rhetorical support to Pakistan. I should also say that while there have been serious anxieties and tensions between India and China, a few months ago, a rapprochement process was begun. And the Prime Minister Modi met with Xi Jinping, and that rapprochement process has been in the works. So that's significant. I don't know how it was gamed because nobody knew that this was going to happen. But the fact is that India and China today are in a better place. Not that anyone in India is saying China is going to stand with us, but I think it's relatively better to what it was. And there's a sense that the support won't go beyond rhetoric.
Just finally, I know you're on your way to Jammu, which suggests you think this is going to go on for a bit. But you don't think this is heading into a bigger war, do you?
Honestly, the answer to that would be, I don't know. I think India is not seeking war. I think India has made the point it wanted to. Now, depending on Pakistan's response, this could either go higher up the escalatory ladder and open up other fronts of conflict, or it could be contained. We don't know. We just don't know the answer to that.
Barkha Dutt, thank you very much. Ayesha, first of all, what do you think the Prime Minister's instruction to retaliate means?
It's for the military to decide what would it count as retaliation. I mean, any response would, of course, need to take into account a couple of factors. First being, how do you convince the world that whatever you're going to target are not genuine, just targets? India's claims are that it has targeted specific, madrasas occupied by certain particular militant groups based inside Pakistan. What will Pakistan, be targeting? Would it go for military targets, hard targets, or soft targets? And in both cases, that would entail expansion of conflict. And the nature of the attack, of course, would really have influence on escalation.
Yeah.
So they have to be very careful.
I mean,
So
India has
basically
India has not gone for Pakistani military targets. It's gone for what it says are militant group targets. But it's hard to see what else Pakistan can target other than the Indian military.
India has kind of explained its case to the world. And if Pakistan retaliates, how will it explain to the world? If it's going to go after, civilian targets, then there's going to be escalation. If it goes for military targets, there would be escalation. And so the question is, the Pakistani Prime Minister has basically given it, the responsibility to the military, because right now this is one of the weakest governments Pakistan has.
So what do you think the military concerns will be? I mean, are they likely to want to actually strike at Indian military targets, or will they be counselling caution?
There is anger, there is anxiety. Like in India, there is anger and anxiety in Pakistan. But I think what falls on the army chief's shoulders entirely, more than the prime minister, because the army chief has somehow taken the responsibility of everything from running politics to the economy to military strategy, of where would he want to stop himself. It's too early at this stage, but it has been confirmed by various Indian sources that I've spoken to that at least 3 to 4 Indian Air Force aircraft have been downed. So either he can satisfy himself with that, as had happened earlier on in 2019 with Pulwama Balakot, or he can move on and say, no, I'm hell-bent on doing something else. But with escalation of conflict, it means he has to look at Pakistan's economy, Pakistan's political affairs, and a lot more things are on his shoulder than just carrying out a decision.
Yes, and how stable do you think the government is? And is there any possibility that the military will say, well, once again, we're going to have to step in and take over the political affairs?
It's already running the political affairs. It's not a question of the government here. I mean, what we are talking about, what I'm talking about, is not the political government. The political government has already given entire control to the military. It's the army chief we are talking about, who is concerned about his image, who is concerned about presenting a different, stronger, sturdier Pakistan. So already he has the power to do it. The question is it a matter of if he doesn't deliver a counterattack? Is he more worried about how does he come out looking as a weak general, which may then create issues for him with his own army circles saying, this man can't do the job. Or, he can live with kind of limiting the response to where it stands today.
And where do the geopolitics step in here? I mean, who are Pakistan's allies in this situation, given that the Americans seem to be, saying things that are pretty pro-Indian?
Well, despite what you're hearing pro-Indian, I think the fact is that Pakistan is in conversation with the United States. Do not forget that very recently Donald Trump thanked Pakistan for helping it capture the Islamic State Khorasan terrorist and handing him over to Washington. So they have a good counter-terrorism dialogue. Then, of course, there is China, and then there is Turkey. There is Saudi Arabia, and they're all in conversation. These are Pakistan's friends. Now, I think what is different about today's conflict as compared to the previous ones India-Pakistan have fought is that this time the world also has other concerns. So they don't want the two countries going into conflict. That's for sure. And the other is that they're willing to have a conversation and arrange a conversation between India and Pakistan to stop both of them. But even China is worried about, of course, Pakistan's security, but it's not going to kind of step out of line and do something which kind of drags it in this conflict directly. So these are friends who are trying to calm, who are interested in a strong Pakistan, but also friends who would like this conflict to end and not, result in grievous harm to Pakistan.
The fact that the Indians have gone for airstrikes already ratchets it up one step in terms of the kind of conflict it is. It's obviously very different to the Kargil War, which was fought on the ground. Is it possible that sort of a ground skirmish is one of the things that comes out of this? Or are we already past that?
A ground war, I'm still thinking is something which will be avoided, which is not to anybody's interest. When we're talking India-Pakistan comparison, we are looking at a situation where India-Pakistan have a numerical asymmetry, but qualitatively there is a symmetry. It's not that Pakistan is a weak country with lesser capabilities and wouldn't be able to defend itself in a short war. Because whatever wars in the past have been short wars, but this one is going to be shorter because both countries are nuclear armed and there is a concern of nuclear deterrence kicking in. So therefore, I don't think, and it's not to the benefit of either to cross over unless some other red line is crossed.
The other point that the Indians keep making is, why has Pakistan allowed these camps to continue? I mean, they've been there for decades. Why hasn't it done more to crack down on these people who are actually causing havoc for Pakistan as much as anything else?
There is from Pakistan's perspective, there are two kinds of militants. One is it's the same old good Taliban, bad Taliban strategy. It is being attacked by the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, associate with Afghanistan. Now, these groups, these madrasas and mosques which have been targeted inside Pakistan belong to groups which are kind of have always been closer to the state, and therefore there's no need to respond to them or attack them. So that's where the difference lies. The other thing is that from Pakistan's perspective, there is a larger issue of Kashmir unresolved. The Kashmir dispute still remains unresolved. And if there is a conflict between India and Pakistan, then these militant groups would be fighting on Pakistan's side, and therefore they've been kept. They've not been eliminated. So, I'm not justifying it, I'm explaining that what is that perspective.
But do you think that rationale still holds water now? I mean, given where we've got to, I mean, does it not make sense for Pakistan to say, okay, we're going to get rid of all our militant groups and we're going to, end any possibility of being accused of sponsoring or backing terrorism in any way?
The point is that if you believe that India and Pakistan need to resolve Kashmir, and that India is, for example, the other understanding Pakistan has is sponsoring Baloch militants, then there has to be definitely going to be a conversation. The problem is that since 2019, both countries have not had a conversation. That's a real challenge here. So once you sit down, perhaps you can talk about Kashmir, you can talk about Balochistan, but there's been no back channel since, I believe, 2020, 2021. A conversation has to start. And this is something which they'd probably negotiate. But the understanding in Islamabad is that this is something we need for, something that, you'll barter and you'll exchange one for the other. But when the point comes for that negotiation, that's when it will happen.
Yes, I mean, the trouble is that Prime Minister Modi is not showing any signs of feeling that he needs to sit down and negotiate because he feels strong.
Well, but I think even if you feel strong, you need to have this conversation. I mean, this is a conflict which, if it escalates, it's definitely going to be damaging for Pakistan, but it's not going to be good for India either. So the need for a conversation is important.
And so, I mean, from everything you're saying suggests that people with calm heads in Pakistan will be doing everything that they can to make sure this doesn't escalate. So at the moment, it's a very delicate balancing act of satisfying the desire for some sort of retaliation with not pushing things over the brink.
Well, that's what one had expected, even in India's case, that Mr. Modi would look at the benefits versus cost of escalating. But he did, because he's a populist and because there's pressure on him. In some ways, lesser ways, but this one, the army chief, is a populist as well. So there is a pressure on him.
What difference do you think nuclear weapons have actually made? I mean, the way that this is always portrayed in Western media is, you have these two nuclear-armed neighbours, and there's a sort of a rush to, oh my God, are we going to nuclear war every time anything happens? Obviously, both sides are not interested in that. But what's the actual change in the dynamic because of nuclear weapons and their existence?
Well, wars are limited, and they have to be more cautious and much more geostrategically rational about how far do they extend. They have a range of weapons as well. 3-4 days ago, Pakistan tested its surface-to-surface, short-range surface-to-surface missile. The options are limited. These are two countries next door to each other. So of course the threat increases. But I think what is problematic at this point in time is that we're looking at a situation where, in terms of geopolitics, there is not a bigger power, so to say, which used to come immediately to help and say, all right, quieten both and say, you have to calm down. That situation is not there. So they have to figure out on their own, in some ways, how far to push this conflict.
Ayesha, thank you very much. And that's it for this edition of the Forecast. Until next time, bye-bye.